What hundreds of thousands of fathers, sons and brothers write home are impressions from the great events of their time, impressions that are of particular importance to their loved ones. The writer should keep this and the following points in mind. This seems pretty full. Finally, it's Sunday again, and it's time for another episode of Feldpost Sunday here on the World War II History and Reenacting YouTube channel. Let's see if there's any Feldpost. Are you ready? 3, 2, 1. Kein Feldpost. But don't worry, the Reichspost always delivers. Wir haben Feldpost. This seems pretty full. Interesting. I think we'll put these behind here. Start with this one, shall we? All right. How nice. Exciting, exciting. Ooh. That's pretty cool. Well, this is obviously not directly military, but it's definitely of the period and typical office supply for any Schreibstube or anything like that. This is an original period German 2-hole office desk punch made by the firm Sanneken. It's marked with the number 220, which denotes the model, and the letters DRP, which translates to Deutsches Reichspatent. Overall, it's in decent working condition and a nice addition to the office display, although it's unfortunately missing its paper guide bracket, the one that ensures consistent placement of the holes, which was also adjustable for use with various paper sizes. The next one. Are you guys ready? What could this be? This is really cool. This is really cool and fits perfectly with this channel, this series. Wow. This is really cool. So here you can write your Christmas letters home. Und handeln sollst du so, als hinge von dir und deinem Tun allein das Schicksal ab der deutschen Dinge und die Verantwortung war dein. This quotation comes from the poem Fichte an jedem Deutschen, the second and last stanza written by Albert Mattei, a German writer and editor who passed in 1924. The poem was inspired by Fichte's Reden an die deutsche Nation and was written during the New Year's holiday in 1922. These are allegedly the words of the German post-Kantian philosopher Johann Gottlieb Fichte, that one should act as if everything German depended upon you and your act alone, and as if the whole responsibility was yours. This must have been a popular quote, as it was frequently used within German propaganda. I have also found several prominent characters citing this poem, among them alleged criminals, quoting the same stanza. For instance, Franz Josef Huber, head of the Gestapo in Vienna from 1938 until late 1944, quoted this same stanza during his trial. Something that I find rather odd is that the last stanza from this poem, which is presented on the cover of this Feldpost paper sheet pad, appears to be quoted from another German writer, a former Navy officer, named Bogislaw von Selschow. Although he wrote several known poems, I can't seem to find any evidence that this is one of his. He passed in 1943, and maybe this could be a tribute to him or just simply a mix-up. Even Generaloberst Heinz Guderian apparently made the same mistake in his biography, Erinnerungen eines Soldaten, Recollections of a Soldier, published in 1952. In his memoirs, he raises serious allegations against Hitler's strategy in the Russian campaign and so forth. And he closes his reflection with the same last stanza from the poem. And similar to the paper pad, he proceeds to quote Bogislaw. Perhaps Bogislaw at some point quoted a poem from Albert Mattei in one of his own publications, leading others to believe that it was him and not Mattei who wrote the poem. I don't know. On the occasion of Christmas 1944, this unique Feldpost writing paper pad was gifted to German units stationed in Norway on behalf of the Supreme Commander of the German Army Forces in Norway. These pads were probably gifted in large quantities, and one could most certainly have seen these made available to the soldiers in the barracks, at a military office, canteens, resting homes, and similar military establishments, both enabling and encouraging the soldier to write home to their loved ones, a small but considerable moral boost for any soldier. On the reverse, we find some information about Feldpost letters and some general guidelines. It starts off by emphasizing the importance of the Feldpost letter, how it's a link between the front and home, and how its importance and worth cannot be overestimated. What hundreds of thousands of fathers, sons and brothers write home are impressions from the great events of their time, impressions that are of particular importance to their loved ones. The writer should keep this and the following points in mind. Point number 1 puts it bluntly. Schreibe keine Jammerbriefe. Don't write a letter full of lamentation. In other words, a letter of grief, sorrow and misery. It goes on to explain that this is unbecoming of a soldier, and that it will only weigh heavy on the hearts of your loved ones back home. Point number 2 is a warning. You are not to include any enemy propaganda leaflets together with your letters. It further explains that, quote, these are not souvenirs or whatever you consider them to be, end quote. And that by including such items will be met with strict punishment. Only one thing applies to you as a soldier, and that is to hand in all enemy propaganda material to your administrative office. It goes on to justify the reason. You can't expect anything good from our enemy. The countless terror attacks on German women and children should be considerable proof of this. Point number 3 reads as follows. Don't pass on rumors you've heard somewhere through your Feldpost letters. In most cases, such mischief comes from the enemy, who deliberately spreads misinformation to sow confusion and strife among us. If you come across such gossip, put a stop to it immediately. Point number 4 explains that one should only write what one can answer for at any time. Messages from enemy broadcasts reproduced in a Feldpost letter, or even only hints of such, is to be regarded as a crime. Listening to enemy broadcasts is strictly forbidden. Enemy agitation, which is increasingly making use of the radio, works in the most vile means. Its sole purpose is to break our morals and take away our belief in victory. Point number 5 states that your Feldpost letter should be carried by confidence, strength of faith, and certainty of victory. It further emphasizes that one should inspire the weak and fickle, give them new courage and strength. The point also arms the soldier with some reassuring hope and motivation. Even if the situation is serious, we have all the prerequisites in place to allow us to emerge victorious from the bitterest struggle of all time. And the point is ended with a swift reminder. Wars have never been won with pessimism and ill will. The rest of the pad contains hundreds of unused, lined sheets of paper. Just imagine for 1 second the amount of history this simple pad of paper could have produced if it was utilized. In other words, handed out to the troops for Christmas in 1944, or at any time. It would have generated hundreds of personal letters, correspondence of all sorts, love letters, everyday life, personal stories and individual experiences of the war, and many more. Shared between loved ones, destined for fellow comrades, friends and family, or maybe even to a girlfriend back home, anxiously waiting for a comforting sign, the slightest sign of life, from their boyfriend, stationed far away in a foreign land, perhaps at the front lines. Letters of hope, reassurance, daily life, holiday greetings, random gossip. Yes, probably even some grief and sorrow. Destined for all corners of the world. What a special piece of history you are, little writing pad, regardless if you are full, half full, or empty. You are a small but significant piece of the large puzzle that is the Second World War. Well, I guess we got a little carried away there. Let's do this one. All right. This turned out to be a beautiful Sunday after all. Let's open this. Oh, looks like it's plastic bag package day today. Nice. I don't know if you can tell what this is already, but here we have some nice German camouflage. Snow camouflage. Nice, 2 beautiful examples. I'll take a closer look here shortly. Really happy with these. But I also got one more Schneetarnjacke, or really a set with pants and jackets, which I procured locally. And of course didn't come packaged. Here's the third Schneetarnjacke and the pants to go along with it. Pretty cool. So I got no less than 3 original German snow camouflage jackets, including 1 set of trousers. I know that we have unboxed one of these before, but here is a brief recap about the 2-piece snowsuit. The Schneeanzug was a shapeless 2-piece suit which consisted of a lightweight white jacket and trousers, which was allegedly originally first used by German mountain troops prior to the war. But by 1942 they were being issued in large quantities to all frontline troops. I have yet to see any photos or dated examples prior to 1941. On the contrary, the majority of photos showing German mountain troops in Arctic operations in the winter and early spring of 1940 show no such camouflage suits in use. I might also add that some modern publications also mention that the 2-piece snowsuit was generally only issued to mountain troops for use in high-altitude Arctic environments, but I have yet to find any such photos or information to back up any of this. Not only could this 2-piece snowsuit be worn over any type of clothing, providing the soldier with an outer layer of snow camouflage, it was also constructed large enough to be worn over the later padded, reversible winter camouflage suits that were introduced to some troops already in the autumn of 1942, generally consisting of a heavily padded, reversible solid-colored jacket and pants. In the following years, various camouflage patterns and solid color variants of the padded reversible winter suit emerged. Although the suits proved quite effective, they were difficult to keep clean and to launder, and the need for an easily washable, lightweight, white snow camouflage suit that could be worn over the heavy padded uniforms to keep them clean and still provide suitable camouflage was necessary. Due to the nondescript appearance of the snow camouflage garments, the Germans generally utilized color strips of cloth attached to the upper sleeves as a means of identification. The strips, one on each arm, were generally made from black colored fabric sewn directly onto the garment. A reversible black and red colored band was also used. It was attached to the upper sleeves with buttons. The advantage of the reversible system was that various color combinations could be used or switched up if needed. As you can see, this jacket does not have any identification strips. They were probably removed at some point, but one can clearly identify where the strips were sewn onto the upper parts of the sleeves. The straight-cut, non-adjustable jacket as well as the pants were shapeless and oversized, to allow for various layers of uniform and equipment to be worn underneath. It also had to be large enough to fit the previously mentioned heavy padded winter clothing. The jacket was relatively short and featured a 3-button front closure with the buttons spaced fairly generously apart. All sorts of different buttons were used, and nothing really surprises me anymore. The jacket also featured an integral hood that was large enough to accommodate the steel helmet. It also featured 2 reinforced slit or slash openings at the forward waistline, designed to permit access to the underlaying garment pockets or ammunition pouches when worn over the field equipment. The trousers, also white, were equally shapeless and were worn over the winter clothing and preferably tucked into the boots. A preferred method of wearing the 2-piece snowsuit was to tuck the jacket into the pants. This one, which could very well be one of these early pre-war mountain troop examples, stand out from the rest in many different and apparent ways, which could give the claim some credibility, although, as mentioned earlier, I have personally not seen any photos or dated examples showing this style of snowsuit used pre-war. The overall construction appears to be far superior to the other examples. It's constructed from very nice, bleached, heavyweight ribbed cotton twill fabric, as opposed to the typical thin, low-weight, in some cases almost see-through plain cotton or mixed rayon fabric. Better quality materials generally mean early production, as quality fabric, especially cotton and wool, was already a scarce commodity in 1940. But that is not always the case, and definitely not a set rule. Well, let's get back to the point. For what it is, wasting such high quality, high demand fabric to create a simple snow camouflage jacket seems like a waste, considering that there was hardly enough heavy cotton twill fabric available to even line the inside of the regular field blouse in 1941-42, when the production of snowsuits really kicked off. The overall stitching and finishes seen throughout the overall garment are also superior, but that can simply just be in normal variations and different quality standards from the manufacturers. It also features pebbled silver, unpainted, pre-war pressed aluminum buttons, which are all from the same manufacturer and dated 1937. To see this style of buttons on a garment like this is quite rare. Of course, these buttons could have been added at any time, but they appear to be original to the garment. But that does not mean that they were added in 1937. The date only refers to when the buttons were manufactured. Apart from the sizing stamp, size 2, I can't find any other stamps or markings. Winter camouflage and other winter equipment was handed in at the end of the winter season, where it was washed, repaired, and stored until it was reissued again the following season. This example has had quite a few repairs due to some burn damage. It's been mended with a sewing machine in several places and has even had some patchwork done to a few areas. The second example is also a great piece. It's made from a thinner weight material, which I believe to be rayon, or perhaps a cotton and rayon blend. It features all matching medium-sized paper-pressed buttons, which appear to be original to the garment. The buttonholes are machine finished. Similar to the previous example, This one also has the identification strips removed. And it's another size too. This particular example was made by the well-known company Grail, at the time one of Germany's leading clothing manufacturing firms, mainly specializing in work and menswear. They are still in business today. There are no other visible stamps or markings to be found. The third example is again slightly different to the previous examples. This one is made from a medium weight, slightly bleached, almost natural cotton fabric. With that I mean that it's more white than plain natural cotton, but the natural brown spots seen in natural unbleached cotton is still visible. The white buttons featured on this example I'm not really sure about, as I'm not familiar with this kind, and they could possibly be civilian or even post-war. They appear to be made from white bakelite, and it's a color rarely seen on Wehrmacht bakelite pieces, but examples do exist. Again, this one also has the identifying strips removed from the arms. There are no markings or stamps to be found on this garment. Here is a comparison showing a few of the many different buttons one can expect to find. Here are some examples of the different textures and various weights of fabric. Keep in mind that the difference in color shades shown here could possibly and will most certainly be due to aging and staining, but it would be natural to see different color shades in the fabric from the different factories, even from the same factory. Different buttonhole finishes. Note the two keyhole-shaped buttonholes featured on the two examples to the right, as opposed to the two straight-line buttonholes on the left. Again, a layout of 4 different examples of slit pockets. They appear to be pretty much identical. Now let's take a look at these pants, which are of course more rare than the jacket. This example is made from bleached heavyweight rib cotton twill fabric, somewhat similar to the first jacket we looked at. It's fairly large in size, and I'm guessing that the letter M translates to the size medium, which was probably added post-war by the Norwegian army. The pants feature the original waist drawstring and the typical slit or slash type pockets. There's also a drawstring around the ankles, but I think the original drawstring was unfortunately replaced post-war. There is also slight wear and repairs to the inside of the lower legs, as well as the odd repair here and there. I can't seem to find any markings or stamps anywhere, but nevertheless a great addition to the collection. Well, the last one. You ready? Oh wow. Sure wasn't kidding about those plastic bags. Plastic bag Sunday. So what do you think is in these bags? You ready? 3, 2, 1. Nice! Similar to German uniforms and equipment. That's beautiful. For the most part. Yes! There is no so-called model designation. These are mainly collector terms, used to create a general timeline for identifying the major evolution of certain items, and what year they were or thought to have been introduced. So here we have yet another original Norwegian pre-war army uniform. Beautiful. This overcoat example was introduced in the mid to late 1890s and is identified as an M1894 overcoat by collectors. I've recently learned that this particular type of coat was worn together with the dark M1894 uniform, which is a somewhat strange and interesting color combination in my opinion. It was cut rather large, especially in the shoulders, to accommodate the bulky shoulder insignia of the period, more specifically, epaulets. These overcoats are considered to be quite rare and seldom come up for sale, not only due to the fact that these uniforms are now well over 100 years old. They were used by soldiers leading up to and during the German invasion of Norway in April 1940, giving them a service life of approximately 40 to 50 years. When or if this model was entirely replaced by the newer models, the first of which was introduced only 2 decades later, I do not know. But it appears that at least officers and non-commissioned officers were authorized to still wear them. Perhaps some older reservists mobilized with their old issued uniforms in April 1940, and other reservists might have been issued one from the supply store. Were they still issued to regular troops up until 1940? Well, maybe, probably. In fact, they are not that different to the later models of overcoat, and they are frequently misidentified as the so-called 1914 model due to the many similarities. Later, during the German occupation of Norway from 1940 until 1945, they were also widely used by Norwegian members of the Norwegian National Socialist Party as well as other related Norwegian organizations during the Second World War. In most cases, of course, with replaced buttons and insignia. In fact, the leader of the Norwegian National Socialist Party, Vidkun Quisling, is seen wearing the so-called M1894 overcoat in various photographs on multiple occasions during his reign. And it might seem that this was his favorite overcoat. Vidkun Quisling was an officer before the war, and you can see him in this photograph from the 1920s wearing the same type of overcoat. Another prominent Norwegian seen wearing the same type of overcoat is the first commander of the Norwegian Legion, Legion Sturmbannführer, later Obersturmbannführer, Arthur Quist. These two individuals served in the Norwegian army before the war, and that might explain why they are wearing these kind of uniforms, because they already had them. Given its prolonged service life, in some cases close to 50 years, nearly 40 years past its initial official service life, approximately from 1894 until 1914. It then remained partially in service until 1940 by the Norwegian Army, and from 1940 until 1945 by the previously mentioned organizations, even though it was probably already considered an antique in 1914. This overcoat is in great shape, considering it could be over 130 years old by now. Besides from the occasional private purchase made by officers and non-coms, I would assume that the regular production ceased with the adoption of the new model overcoat around 1914. One also has to consider that the Norwegian army was tiny, comprised of very few soldiers, which naturally means fewer uniforms. And there are definitely not many of these overcoats left out there. The overcoat is made from heavyweight, high-quality field grey wool, and besides from a little bit of minor mothing in a few areas, in remarkably good condition considering the age of the garment. Similar to the dark uniform, there is a beautiful red-colored piping on various parts and details, such as the shoulder boards, around the cuffs, back strap, and around the collar. This colored piping is not to be confused with the branch of service, as it was not the piping but the buttons which denoted the branch of service on these early Norwegian pre-war uniforms. The silver uniform buttons features the embossed Norwegian lion, which denote the branch of service as the infantry. All the buttons appear to be present and matching. Unlike Mr. Quisling's M1894 overcoat, this particular example has the addition of a small breast pocket, although I do not know the significance and the use of this pocket, but I do know that coats with this specific detail is considerably more rare than its plain counterpart. Another interesting detail is the rank insignia, which is comprised of a series of metal stars individually sewn onto the shoulder boards. This type of star-shaped rank insignia is in fact incorrect for this model of overcoat. The coat is therefore recognized as a transitional piece, which was very common. In fact, finding one with its original period insignia is even increasingly more rare, on top of being rare in the first place. The use of star-shaped rank insignia was introduced in the early 1900s, and by circa 1914 it was the norm, meaning that the majority of older spec uniforms still in use were generally converted to this new style. This overcoat holds the Norwegian rank of Premierleutnant, which was later renamed Lieutenant in the 1930s. The interior is fully lined, and the lining is in beautiful condition. There are unfortunately no apparent stamps or markings to be found on this example, leading me to believe that this is probably a private purchase garment. Overall, except for a few areas of mothing, it's in a very nice worn condition.